basically the premise of this bill is as long as you're not white, you qualify. And that is discrimination. Because by our race, we do not qualify for this.
American Indian, Alaskan Native, Asian Black, African American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, Hispanic, or Latino, and you were in that group, you were told you didn't have to pay your bills, essentially?
Yes, that's correct, and that your loan would be forgiven up to 120% of the loan value.
Boy. So we got to talk about a bombshell story that is being covered by News Nation involving Joe Biden, okay, and some of his discriminatory policies that created some backlash from white farmers. Now, again, this is the type of story that you're probably never going to see on MSNBC or CNN or any other news outlet. But hey, News Nation has picked it up because a whistleblower has come out basically exposing how this Biden-era program was discriminatory. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this.
Of the Biden administration. In fact, he's usually quite the opposite. There is arguably, however, nothing quite as harsh as Trump's anger over Biden's DEI policies. Well, in a News Nation exclusive, senior national correspondent Brian Enton spoke to a manager at the Federal Farm Bureau who was blowing the whistle. He says a Biden-era law appears to be helping all farmers, but in reality is only helping some. And he showed us the documents to prove it.
When former President Joe Biden left Washington, D.C., he was leaving behind a DEI secret involving American farmers and $800 million in taxpayer money. And a United States Department of Agriculture whistleblower is now sounding the alarm.
It was to pay off anyone who wasn't a white male's loan. That was the only qualification for this loan forgiveness.
And what was the reaction?
So it was really silent. They were trying to keep this hushed because of the obvious implications of race-based loan forgiveness.
Race-based loan forgiveness. It's in black and white, buried in the American Rescue Plan Act. The United States Secretary of Agriculture shall provide a payment in an amount up to 120% of the outstanding indebtedness of each socially disadvantaged farmer or rancher. The act explicitly lays out who's considered socially disadvantaged.
So just to be clear, if you were American Indian, Alaskan Native, Asian Black, African American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, Hispanic, or Latino, and you were in that group, you were told you didn't have to pay your bills, essentially?
Yes, that's correct, and that your loan would be forgiven up to 120% of the loan value.
That's wild. That's super wild, right? This is what they do, right? This is how they disguise their racism, okay? They say, well, if you're socially disadvantaged, what the hell does that mean? What the hell does socially disadvantaged mean, right? I'm black, okay? I'm black as hell. And I don't feel socially disadvantaged, right? In fact, I may have some advantages, right? But according to the Biden administration, if you are not white, you are socially disadvantaged, and therefore you are entitled to loan forgiveness that other farmers are not entitled to because they're white, right? And again, I just keep thinking about what does socially disadvantaged mean? Like, this is a new word, right? I'm thinking, like, what does that mean? Like, does that mean if you're white, somehow, some way you have an advantage, I guess, socially versus, other people? And I'm thinking, like, well, I think there's actually more of an individual thing, right? I think that there are a lot of so-called people of color that are good when it comes to their social skills, right? They're good at connecting and talking to people and stuff like that. So again, what does that mean, right? If you're an introvert, okay, if you're an introvert, then by definition, I think that you might be socially disadvantaged, okay? That's the way I think about it. If you're an extrovert, you kind of outgoing or whatever, then you have a social advantage. I'm not sure if that has anything to do with skin color or race. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. I'm just saying, it's just kind of weird to me to call people who are not white socially disadvantaged and people who are white socially advantaged. But again, you got to watch out for these buzzwords, man. You got to watch out for, they come up with new stuff every single day to discriminate against white people. And then they point the finger at you and say you're a bad person. You're a racist for calling it out, right? Or in my case, being black and calling it out, right? Being against all forms of racism and discrimination, well, you selling out, right? You selling out if you don't want to discriminate against whites. What are you doing? Because again, a lot of these people believe that this is some type of race war where you got to pick a side, right? You're either with this or against this, and I'm like, no, I'm just for actual equal treatment, right? That is what I'm for, which apparently is a controversial thing in 2025.
To me, it was combating racism with more racism. I couldn't believe that it was happening in today's age.
James Dunlap owns a small family farm in Baker City, Oregon. He works 2 other jobs to keep his farm afloat, but did not qualify for the loan forgiveness because he's white.
I knew what they were saying was that minority farmers were going to have their loans forgiven for no reason other than they decided to, they being the government. So.
And how much money they had nothing to do with it.
As far as I understand, not at all. It wasn't about hardship. It wasn't about financial situations at all. It was purely what box you checked under that ethnicity line on your application.
If you checked a non-white box, you got the free money, no matter how rich you were. James and other white farmers sued the Biden administration and were successful. The loan forgiveness for any farmer who's not white was stopped. The judge writing in his decision, it was an actual constitutional harm that cannot be undone. And James and other white farmers will suffer the harm of being excluded from eligibility for that debt relief program solely on the basis of his race. That harm he has shown is irreparable. But this is where things get interesting. The Biden administration was not ready to give up. They passed the Inflation Reduction Act to help farmers who couldn't pay their loans. It was supposed to help all farmers, but News Nation has learned all farmers were not told about it. News Nation obtaining a copy of this email that was sent out to share information about new payments and/or loan modifications that may assist you. But here's the catch. Our whistleblower says it was only sent to the minority farmers, aka the socially disadvantaged group. And he says USDA workers were even instructed to tell that group to stop paying their loans because they would still be forgiven. The whistleblower says none of the white farmers he works with received the email.
They got nothing. It might not meet the legal definition of fraud, but it isn't right. It was discriminatory, it was unethical, and the people who pushed it are still in charge of the agency.
They're still in charge?
Yes. At our national office, they're still, Trump hasn't got rid of them.
We reached out to the United States Department of Agriculture. They did not respond to our specific questions or our questions about what the whistleblower said, that some of these DEI policies still remain in effect and in some of the documentation. But they did send us this statement, Elizabeth. I want to read to you in part. It says, it is absurd that while the Biden administration was driving up inflation, American taxpayers were forced to fund billions in woke DEI initiatives. No one should be shocked that Biden weaponized bipartisan farm programs to discriminate and provide taxpayer dollars to one group based on race and not on merit. On day one, Secretary Rollins issued a memo to rescind all DEI programs. Instead, USDA is reprioritizing unity, equality, meritocracy, and colorblind policies. And the USDA says they are also reviewing the Inflation Reduction Act funding to ensure that that money is now going out to all farmers equally instead of just one specific group.
Oh, yeah. The Trump administration needs to get on that ASAP, right? And fire anybody that is involved in the discrimination, right? So this is something that needs to be corrected. And it's not acceptable to have this type of racial discrimination in this country, right? Where you have people who are getting favorable treatment from the government based off race. Right? I mean, like, come on. Can anybody really watch the story and say, oh, yeah, that makes sense, right? That's totally right, right? It's totally right to say, screw white farmers, okay, and we're going to help everybody else. And, white farmers don't get help regardless of their socioeconomic status, regardless of their income, regardless of how big their farm is or, how much they produce. Yeah, we don't care. You have an advantage because you're white. Okay, and because of that, it's okay for the government to discriminate against you. No, this is not how our country is supposed to work. It's not how our country is supposed to work. And, stories like this tend to fly on the radar because nobody really cares when white folks are subject to racism and discrimination, right? People just assume that, well, you're righting a wrong, right? In this case, the argument from some of the so-called minority farmers is that, well, the USDA discriminated against us in the past, right? And because of that, we have to have discrimination today, right, in the present, in order to fix that. And that's what the Biden administration tried to do, right? They essentially tried to do it twice. They tried to do it initially in 2021 with the debt relief that you guys learned about in that video, the $4 billion for socially disadvantaged farmers in the American Destruction Plan, right? That's what they did. And then that got shot down in court, okay? And they tried to do it again by essentially passing this debt relief in the Inflation Reduction Act, but they changed it to economically distressed farmers. Now, the problem with this is that they didn't actually inform the white farmers about their eligibility for debt relief in the Inflation Reduction Act, right? Instead, they just informed the minorities to make sure only minorities were getting the money. Again, this is overt discrimination. And the worst part about it is that when it gets shot down in court, they kept trying to do it. They were like, okay, we shot it down. So what we're going to do is that we're just going to be more sneaky about it. And this is why the Trump administration has to purge all forms of DEI out of the government, period. When these people come out here and talk, oh, you just hate DEI because you hate blacks. Again, that is a distraction from what DEI actually is, right? It is state-sanctioned racism. It is state-sanctioned discrimination, specifically against white people, okay? But again, they'll try to gaslight you and say that, well, if you're against DEI, you're against diversity, right? You're against women, you're against minorities. And it's like, no, I'm not against minorities. I just feel that the best way to remedy past discrimination is not with present day or future discrimination, is with treating everybody equally and letting people compete on an equal playing field, right? Regardless of their skin color or their race, which I fail to understand how this is a controversial viewpoint. I don't understand why is it that people just cannot be okay with everybody being treated equally in 2025. But, you know, the left, they are hell-bent on taking us backwards, right, as a society, right? Progressivism is actually regressivism in disguise, right? That's exactly what it is. I think stories like this are exactly what I'm talking about. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.